What does that even mean, Bowers Game Corner?
Ahoy there, YouTube! I'm back again today for another game review. And today I'm very excited to check out The King is Dead from Osprey Games. It's for 2 to 4 players, take about 30 to 45 minutes to play, and it's for ages 12 plus. And The King is Dead is an area control game where you're not actually going to be trying to control areas, but trying to decide who's going to be the king of the land and then schmoozing up to that king. It's a really simple game that's a little bit more difficult to explain than you might like it to be, but is it good? Let's open it up and I'll tell you what I think. Alright then, we're going to take a look at what's inside of The King is Dead. So first and foremost, we got a handy dandy rule booklet, 3 pages, double-sided, full color, full of pictures, illustrations, examples. It's a pretty well done rule booklet. It says it'll keep you up and running in 10 minutes. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but it's still a well done rule booklet. So in The King is Dead, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be pulling cubes off of the board, and you're hoping to have more cubes than anyone else of specific colors, and then you're also hoping that whichever color you have the most of corresponds to who ends up winning the region in this area control game. That might not have made too much sense, but let me just show you how the game is played. It'll make much more sense. So we'll go over the components, we'll get into the gameplay. So component-wise, you're going to have this board right here. There are 8 different regions on the board, and they are represented by 8 different cards around the outside. These cards will be shuffled up and dealt at the beginning of the game. There's 3 special regions on here, the blue one, the orange one, and the red one, and those ones are going to start with primarily a little bit more of that color. So you're always going to start with 2 on the blue, 2 on the red, and 2 on the yellow, and then you're going to make sure that each region has 4 cubes on it. There's also an advanced version of the game, which I really like a lot, that's going to add these black cubes in, but I'll talk more about that in the pros and cons. Let's talk about the base game now. So next, each player is going to dealt 2 random cubes, and then you're going to be on your way. So each player is next going to get 8 action cards. And that's one little problem I have with the game, is that I feel like the color palette's just a little bit too similar for my liking, but I'll talk about that later. So there's 8 different actions that you'll be able to take in this game. And here's the thing with the actions. Once you take an action, that action is gone. It's done forever. You will not get that back. So you have a grand total of 8 actions to take in this game. So you need to really make sure that you use them wisely. So let's just start up the game and then you'll see what's going on. So I'll just say I'm the first player, and we would start on Aqua Solis because that is the number 1. So at the end of this round, whoever has the most cubes of a particular color will win control of this region right here, which is why now you want to try and modify the cubes by playing these cards right here. So let's talk about the different cards that you're going to get in the game. These 3 are all very similar. How it works is you're going to be able to take 2 blues, 2 reds, or 2 yellows and place them into a city that is next to a city that already has control. So for instance, for this one, I could place 2 blue next to any city that's next to an already blue-controlled area. Likewise with yellow and red. So those ones are pretty self-explanatory. This one, you'll be able to put a blue, a yellow, and a red in 3 different areas on the map, anywhere you choose to put them. I'll get into that one last. This one is going to allow you to do a 2-for-1 swap, so that one's pretty cool as well. And then they have to be next to each other, though, which they have to be right next to each other. This one you can do a 1-for-1 swap, but they have to be apart from each other. This one is the same as the one I already talked about. And then this one is actually going to change the order of the cards you're playing with. So let's just say a bunch of people spend action cards messing with Aqua Solis, and I say, you know what, I don't want to mess with Aqua Solis right now. I want to mess with something else, so we're just going to go ahead and do a quick swap-a-roo like that, and then everyone's going to start with a crown tile as well. So then you would get to place a crown tile onto one of these 2, which means, one of the 2 that you mess with, which means that now that is officially locked into that place. So now we are going to do Curleon instead, and nothing can change that. So this card gets discarded. I won't have it for the rest of the game, but every time you use an action card, you also get to draw 1 cube off the board from anywhere you want, except for the, the bank up here. So let's just say I really want to focus on blue, so we did Curleon, and I feel like that's a losing cause. You know what? I might just take the blue from here, and boom. So now I would have 2 blues and a red. So the big thing to remember is when you play an action, you are always going to be picking up a cube after you are done. So now, let's just say that I played a card, somebody passed, somebody passed, somebody passed, and it comes back to me. And I pass again, which now means Curleon is now in control of the red. These cubes go off the board, and now red is one step closer to owning the entire board, which means these red cubes got a little bit more valuable as long as you have the most of them. So next we would go on to Roulac, which is right there, and blue is in the lead, and we would once again rinse, wash, and repeat playing our cards. And you're going to continue to do that until every single spot on the board has a token on it. Now there's one last kind of token which I haven't mentioned, which are the bad guys. And if there's ever a tie, so let's say like right here is what's happening, this would be considered a tie, which means this would go here. And if you ever get 4 of these, the game will end immediately. And there's a different victory condition involving set collection. But for the most of the time, that probably isn't going to happen unless you want it to happen. But anywho, once you have a bunch of tiles on the board like so, whoever has the most cubes of those tiles will be the winner of The King is Dead. And if there's a tiebreaker, I think there's 2 tiebreakers to break it up. But that in a nutshell is what you're going to get with The King is Dead. Alright then, The King is Dead from Osprey Games. What are my final thoughts? Let's go to the pros, let's go to the cons. First, on the con side, game's not going to be for everybody for a variety of different reasons. 2 to 4 players, restricted player count. Also, at 4 players, it becomes a team version of the game, which is a little bit weird. I personally really like the team version of the game, and I think it's really interesting, especially the fact that you can't talk to each other about strategy at all. Like, there is absolutely zero table talk, and that can make some interesting situations. But still, I think some people are not going to like the fact that at 4 players, it is cooperative. Another con that I have with the game is that I'm not the biggest fan of the color palette they chose to use, especially when you play with the black cubes, the bad guys. You're supposed to look at the upper right-hand corner to see if things are brown or purple, and the brown and purple look pretty similar. Also, all the player cards look somewhat similar. It's not a big deal. I feel like I just wish they would have used more distinctive colors. But granted, I know they were going for a specific color palette with with this theme. Any other cons that I have with the game? It's a little bit more difficult than you'd like it to be. Wrap your brain around it first, especially if it's all new players. Like the first time we played this, we couldn't just wait, what? So this is because we played it 4 players. We're like, oh wait, are you sure this is a 4-player game? And then it's like, oh yeah, if you're playing 4 players, then you do cooperative. And we're like, oh okay, now we get it. But then it's like, wait, so what happens this? We had to go back to the rule booklets quite frequently to figure everything out when we first started. About halfway through, we all knew exactly what we were doing, but it did take some people longer than you would like to wrap your brain around this. So this is definitely the kind of game that's going to get better with repeated plays as you know what you're doing. Last con I have with it, 2, 3, 4 players, all very different experiences, which I personally don't mind that because I think they're decent experiences, but some people like it when the game from player count to player count plays very similarly, and this one is slightly different, especially with 4 players and just lots of stuff happening. But moving on to the pros, I really enjoyed The King is Dead. It was a lot of fun, and I think a lot of people are going to like this. It's a really interesting area control game in the aspect that, no, I don't have a color. I'm kind of like this cell sorted. I'm just trying to schmooze up to who I think is going to win, and then I'm trying to manipulate and make certain colors win, or sometimes I'm trying to make them tie, but I want to be careful that if they tie, because then the bad guys start coming, and I really like when you play with the expansion that adds the little black cubes, and then you have to be worried about those two different cities right there, because the more black cubes they get, the more powerful it is, and then that completely changes the win condition, and you get to the point like mid-game where it's like, oh man, I don't know, should I be going for sets or should I be going for colors? I don't know how this game is going to end. I also like there's a very slight memory aspect where you're like, all right, which card has he not played yet? Now at 2 players you can kind of remember, but once you get to 3 and 4 players, it's a lot more difficult to remember which cards have and have not been played. And I really did enjoy the game. I thought it was really cool. It's on the cheaper side. The box insert is nice. I like how the board looks. It looks like an old-timey Game of Thrones map, which is kind of cool. And rule booklet, components, everything's pretty well done except for that color palette that I wasn't the biggest fan of. So, in the end, The King is Dead. Easy recommendation if you're in the market for a 2 to 4 player area control game that plays relatively quickly. It says 30 to 45 minutes, but honestly, I think if it's your second or third time playing through, you should just breeze through this game because it's just pass, pass, action. Ooh, pass. Ooh, I'm going to do an action. Pass, pass, pass. All right, who has control? Boom. Take off the cubes, put the color down, key, rinse, wash, repeat. So, King is Dead. Really enjoyed this one from Osprey Games. Go check it out if it looks like it might be your cup of tea. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to click on that subscribe button down below. In the comments below, let me know, would you like to be the king circa, say, 1300? Put a giant target on your back, and if you ever got invaded, you're dead. You're just immediately dead. But still, I would say yes, because you're going to live an amazing life, at least relatively compared to everyone else. But let me know in the comments below. Would you like to be king, or would you rather just be a regular dude just working? And as always, thanks for your time, YouTube.